Imagine this. On October 21st, 2025, the Pacific boils beneath melting ice. A giant shadow, 18 meters long with scythe-sharp teeth, bursts upward, water blasting like a volcano. Boom. Megalodon. A sea monster from 23 million years ago, thought to be buried in the Miocene. But what if climate change woke them? Or a mad lab cloned them back? They rise, eyes rolled white and flashing, and the ocean turns into a graveyard. Look closer. 18 meters long, 70 tons of rippling muscle. A 2-meter wide jaw with 276 triangular teeth, each 18 centimeters. One bite, swallowing a sub whole. They ruled the seas from the Miocene to the Pliocene, hunting whales like toys, gulping 2 tons of meat a day. Why did they vanish? Cooling climate, big prey ran out. Great whites stole territory. Extinct 3.6 million years ago. But what about now? If they return, among giant cargo ships and crowded beaches, chaos erupts, the ocean shakes, tourism collapses, the military buckles. Do we use sonar, torpedoes, or run? Grip your seat, because today we dive into 5 nightmare scenarios where prehistoric jaws tear open the future. Do you dare look into the abyss? Dive 1,000 meters down, the Pacific abyss, where light dies. A school of Megalodon, waking from permafrost, charges in like giant ghosts. They're hungry. Chomp! Jaws rip a pygmy whale. They swallow schools of great whites like gummies. 5 tons of meat a day. The ecosystem collapses. Small fish vanish. Ocean oxygen drops 25%. Coral dies en masse. Climate change speeds up. The ocean acidifies. Earth gets hotter than ever. Oceanographers deploy AI, sonar, sensor webs drifting like sea spiders, dropping electronic decoys to lure them back to the depths. But wait. Splash! The Megalodon pack slams into a gray whale herd. Dorsal fins shred waves, jaws crush bodies. Blood spreads like oil paint, carcasses bobbing. Smaller sharks scatter. The sea thrums like an earthquake. Fishers lose the tuna season. Seafood prices spike 40%. Dinner tables worldwide go bare. We must build no-hunt zones. Underwater laser fences mixed with foul pheromones. Instead of nets, they rip like paper. The ocean is no longer a treasure, but a tomb where monsters swallow life. Can we ever plug that mouth? Miami sunlight, golden beaches, tourists laughing. Then splash. A Megalodon dorsal fin slices the waves like a scythe. 18 meters of shadow blotting the sun. It's hungry. The jaws surge up, chomp, dragging swimmers into the deep. 10 victims a day. Tourism crashes. Hotels empty. Local economy loses $5 billion a year. Flights cancel in droves. Do you dare dip a toe in? The surf runs red. Screams drown out the music. We don't run. Beach engineers deploy smart rescue buoys. Self-driving drone spheres. Vibration sensors reading subsurface tremors. Firing a burst of anesthetic. Pfft, boom. A Megalodon plows into the crowd. The fin flips buoys. The jaws pulp parachutes like paper. Tourists stampede across the sand. Children crying. A 100-meter smear of blood. Helicopters drop smoke bombs. Boom. Chaos. Boiling water. Vacation laughter turns to nightmare. We must ban swimming. Turn beaches into dry zones with wave-proof glass walls. Tourism becomes telescopes staring from afar. Megalodon don't just bite flesh, they shred our summer dreams. How do we save this shore? Gulf of Mexico, sky burning red. A research ship dives. Then, screech. A megalodon scrapes the viewing dome, its body blotting out the light. It's curious. Crack! The jaws tear off a robot arm, swallowing $100 million of gear. Science goes numb. Ocean data lost. Climate projects delayed indefinitely. Can you hear metal twisting? Darkness swallows hope. We strike back. Scientists launch a stealth sub, black carbon hull, reverse sonar that throws fake echoes to fool the beast. But that night, slam! It rams the hull. Glass bursts, water roars in, researchers thrash through the dark. Jaws crush the control bay, robot corpses float like scraps. A scream over radio. It knows we're here. Chaos, freezing water. We must move studies to satellites, use AI to predict migration routes. The ocean now an enemy, not a friend. Megalodon don't just wreck subs, they shred our knowledge. Can science survive that bite? Strait of Malacca, ink-black night, a megafreighter glides. Then, crash! A megalodon bites the prop, engines splinter to pieces. It's enraged. Jaws rip a container. Cargo plunges. $1 billion gone per voyage. Global trade seizes up. Oil jumps 30%. Supply chains snap. Do you feel your ship shudder? The sea turns into a battlefield. Our sailors don't yield. Escort drones, swarms of armed UAVs drop acoustic mines. Boom! To drive it off. But past midnight, slash, it flips a container. Steel rains down, crew leap to lifeboats, jaws gulp them like candy. The tail whips, thud, waves erase the drones. A voice on radio. It's too fast. Chaos. Oil slicks. We must airlift cargo, planes hauling containers. The strait now a steel graveyard. Megalodon don't just bite ships, they sever the economy's lifeline. How does trade survive? Caribbean Sea. Blood-red dawn. A U.S. fleet encircles. Then roar. A megalodon rises, body dwarfing warships. It won't yield. Jaws punch through hulls, torpedoes slip, splash, national security totters, naval secrets spill. Navies unite, smart torpedoes, self-hunting missiles, gene sensors keyed to ancient DNA. But in the glare, whoosh, it dodges bombs, tail flips an escort, crash, helicopters drop like leaves. The sea boils. We relocate bases, track by satellite. The ocean becomes a global foe. Megalodon isn't a bad dream. It's a wake-up roar. They rip into oceans, tourism, the economy. But they also force us to guard the deep more fiercely. Will we learn from those jaws, or let the past swallow us whole? Follow now, like, share, and dive with us into this dark future.
Imagine a cold river at dawn, a thin veil of mist resting on the surface, so quiet you can hear a single drop fall. Suddenly, a massive log seems to tilt. The water bursts, and a broad shield-like head rises. Conical teeth snap shut exactly where a fish had been an instant before. This is not a crocodile. This is Kulasucus. A giant amphibian from the early Cretaceous. And the question is simple and unsettling. If it existed today, what would happen to us? Kulasucus was the last representative of an ancient amphibian lineage called temnospondyls. once thriving long before mammals and birds took over the world. It lived in what is now southern Australia, roughly 120 to 125 million years ago. Its body plan was engineered for underwater ambush. An adult stretched to about 3 meters long, near 10 feet, and could have weighed close to half a metric ton. The skull is estimated at about 65 centimeters, over 2 feet, astonishingly broad and flat, with small bony projections at the rear. In the mouth, beyond the ring of conical teeth, sat extra fangs mounted on the palate. Those palatal tusks were perfect for pinning slippery prey. A wide head, a low barge of a body, powerful forelimbs to lunge and stout hind limbs to kick, a moist absorbent skin like other amphibians, and a system of sensory grooves along the head and trunk to read vibrations in murky water. Even when visibility was poor, it could map a whole bend of the river by feel. Its ancient home was a world of cold, fast rivers at high latitudes, because the region that became Victoria lay much farther south during the early Cretaceous. Winters were long and daylight rhythms were strange. Water ran swift through gravel channels, and the temperature was too low for crocodiles. In that chill, crocodiles were absent, and Kulasucus became the apex predator of the river. When the climate warmed later, crocodiles returned, and the balance shifted against it. That lesson still matters. If a living population of Kulasucus faced our present world, the borders of its habitat would slide with water temperature. Climate does not only move weather fronts, it reshapes who rules the riverbank. Now bring the camera to the 21st century. It is early morning on an upland stream in southern Australia. The water is glassy on top and murky only half a meter down. The shot glides low along reeds and over a silent eddy tucked beneath a fallen tree. The moment a paddle passes, there is a gentle tug at the bow of the kayak. It is not a rock. It is current pulled by a very large body turning in place. A Kulasucus is lying there, motionless like a boulder with algae. When salmon run across its snout, it flexes a wrist, opens that wide trap of a mouth, and the river itself funnels prey between its jaws. You might not notice it. The water notices you. That is how a master ambush hunter disappears in plain sight. In a homecoming scenario, Kulasucus would reappear in cold, oxygen-rich tributaries of Victoria, and perhaps Tasmania. It would choose clean reaches with stony bottoms that allow it to bury in shallow scoops. Most days it would vanish into the riverbed. When it hunts, it becomes a streak of darkness, drives a fish to the gravel, and settles again as if nothing happened. For people, that means quiet infrastructure must change its posture. Low causeways, culverts, and grassy urban margins around Melbourne or Geelong would go from casual walkways to places where an invisible hunter may lie. Seasonal warning signs would become routine. Avoid paddling at dawn and dusk. Create no swim zones for children and pets during the cold months. Install sloped guardrails along promenades, mesh screens on small dams, and redesign fish ladders with shallow, narrow chutes that reduce ambush opportunities. Infrastructure would not just move water anymore. It would negotiate with a survivor from deep time. Ecology would shift in ways that are not automatically negative. With palatal tusks that clamp large fish, Kulasucus could push down invasive carp in reaches that stay cold enough, letting aquatic plants rebound and water clarity improve. Yet there would be real pressure on native fishes and species that support commercial or recreational harvest. Its distribution would draw a moving front line with crocodiles. Warmer, slow water favors crocodiles. Colder, fast water favors Kulasucus. In a warming world, that line would creep upstream year by year. New medical and veterinary concerns would surface. As an amphibian with permeable skin, Kulasucus would be extremely sensitive to chytrid fungal disease, heavy metals, and microplastics. A sudden local decline could ring an alarm about water quality, turning this predator into a living indicator. On the other hand, if curious people tried to hunt or eat it, bioaccumulated contaminants would pose obvious health risks. In protected facilities, it would require chilled flow through pools year-round, cobble and gravel to dig into, infrared cameras, temperature, and dissolved oxygen loggers, routine fungal testing, and large harness-style GPS trackers for short-term releases in enclosed channels. To conserve a primordial hunting machine, we would have to run a full modern machine of science. What if Kulasucus crossed borders? Picture a river in British Columbia, Scandinavia, Patagonia, or New Zealand's South Island. Surface water is clear, and the bottom is a lacework of roots and cavities. It could take a seat there almost overnight. Its new neighbors would include river otters, brown bears in the lower reaches, and human anglers in waders. A test bite at a rubber boot, not out of malice but confusion, would be enough to spark panic. Private ownership would have to be banned. Transport channels would need tight control. Biosecurity would mean quarantine protocols, mandatory microchipping of every research animal, and wide seasonal buffers around spawning ground. One escape could force an entire watershed to change habits. In laboratory or semi-free settings, Kulasucus would offer a window into the past. We could study gas exchange and thermal balance in a giant amphibian adapted to cold water, measure performance as temperature swings, and test how a top-down predator reshapes dull, silted streams. The challenges are real. This animal climbs and wriggles with surprising skill, tolerates heat poorly, and hides brilliantly. Enclosures must be escape-proof, water must be hospital clean, and staff must train like zookeepers who care for crocodilians and giant salamanders at once. Public education would be the other half. Respect and caution without sensationalism would be the tone. Conservation is not putting a creature in a glass tank. It is learning to coexist with a moving shadow underwater. Policy and ethics would march with engineering. A 3-meter, half-ton river predator living where people recreate demands rules similar to those for large carnivores. Any bridge or dam project within its range would require permits and risk mitigation. During breeding season, there might be temporary closures or detours along riverside trails. Public guidance would need to be blunt and calm. Do not enter the water when visibility is poor. Do not dump live bait. Do not nose a kayak into root tangle cavities and culvert mouths. A compensation fund for rare incidents could sit beside a conservation fund that recognizes the scientific value of a living remnant of the temnospondyl line. If you happen to meet one, stay composed. When a very large log-like shape lies sideways in cold, tea-colored water, do not wade directly across. Move to higher bank and go around. While paddling, give wide berth to rock holes, submerged root masses, and culvert mouths, because those are classic ambush stages. If children or pets play in water, choose shallow, clear stretches, under half a meter deep, and avoid dawn and dusk. If you find a big fish carcass with circular scrape marks as if suctioned, take photographs, record the location, and notify the authorities. Reading the signs is the key to staying ahead of a nearly invisible hunter. After all this, the question is not simply whether we want Kulasucus back. The real question is how we would coexist if it returned. On one side lies very real risk that asks infrastructure to adapt and fisheries to learn new rules. On the other is a remarkable opportunity. Rivers could regain energy. Scientists would gain a living climate indicator. All of us would regain a sense that evolutionary history is not finished. On a bitter morning somewhere, a river might bulge with the faintest push from below. Two pale, unblinking eyes, a flat shield of a head, one ring of ripples gliding outward, and then stillness. In that moment, we would understand that Earth does not only keep fossils in stone. Sometimes it allows an old story to rise and test our willingness to share the water. And if the past does rise from the riverbed, are we ready to move with it? Or will we stand on shore and tremble before a nameless shadow? Open your eyes to knife-edge cold. A low flyover skims a Pleistocene steppe, snow thinned by wind to reveal patches of straw-gold grass. Air hisses across the mic like a saw against steel. At the edge of a narrow meltwater ribbon, a crush of Irish elk crowds the bank. Their antlers whole chandeliers of bone lacing together in the mist. From downfield, a bull-woolly rhino plows in, round as a moving boulder wrapped in fur, breath steaming, a low, curved horn cutting the wind. A young elk, jittery and bold, throws its rack to bluff and accidentally blocks the path. The rhino drops its head. Two weapons, one wide, one pointed closed the last half second. Freeze it there. The rhino's horn about to rise into the elk's belly. The elk's broad palm of bone on a trajectory across the rhino's neck. On this icegrass plain, you don't need a predator to die. One bad hit will do. This is late Pleistocene Europe. Winters drag on. The cold bites through thin snow. Poor forage scrapes across the tongue. Melt leads are rare and become biological choke points where everything with a stomach gathers. Elk, woolly rhino, bison, the silhouettes of wild horses in the distance. Here, size writes rules in blunt font. Irish elk stand near 2 meters at the shoulder, their racks spanning 3.5 to 4 meters like a walking gait. Woolly rhino reach roughly the same shoulder height, but pack a ton of weight low to the ground. Their forward horn set right where it menaces the chests of other grazers. There is no clinic and no physical therapy. A broken leg, a blown joint, a cracked horn, even a fractured pedicle where the antler meets the skull each can end the season. In a hungry year, injury is just death spelled slowly. Look closely at the elk, magnificent, yes, and expensive to own. Antlers are living billboards and also cross-cutting blades. They spread in broad palms and tines, dense, heavy, grown each year from a thick pedicle on the skull, and then shed. That annual reset is a triumph of physiology and a serious energy bill. Within the species, fights are mostly rules-based. Lock, push, twist, test. The goal is to read strength, not to open arteries. Against other species, that geometry flips. A rack is poor at piercing. It excels at shoving, sweeping, and slicing sideways. A lucky sweep across a rhino's neck or shoulder can strip hide and bruise muscle, but it rarely penetrates deep the way a narrow horn can. The body that carries that crown is a resonant box for risk. Long legs help on snow, but a high center of gravity means a single hit to the legs or a slip on ice can tilt the entire machine. The antlers themselves create blind arcs left and right. Fast head turns are clumsy in a crowd. At a water edge, where racks interweave, one wrong pivot can tangle with a neighbor, or worse, find bone in a stranger's ribs. Antlers can regrow, that much is true, but an impact that fractures the pedicle sends force into skull and cervical spine places with no new season to fix the error. Now the rhino beauty stripped down to function. Its weapon is low, straight, brutally practical. The forward horn is keratin, not bone but thick, tough, and resilient under bending and impact. When a rhino commits, it lowers the head, loads the forelimbs, and drives a half parabola from below toward a belly or chest. The arithmetic is simple. Body mass plus acceleration delivered through a narrow contact. That is how holes are made. The cost sits in the fine print. Horns do not snap as readily as bone, but when they do chip or break, they never come back quite the same. Choose the wrong angle, slam that horn into hard antler, and the rebound can travel into the neck, shoulder, and foreleg joints, the very hinges that carry a ton of animal across winter ground. Everything else about the rhino's chassis spreads and absorbs load. The back is rounded under a dense coat with insulating fat beneath. The shape helps shed a lateral blow. Legs are short and stout. The center of mass rides low, making a full tip. Over unlikely, but knees and ankles are small gates under a big wall. A clean lateral hit there is a lever straight into failure. Behavior fills out the design. Woolly rhinos avoid pointless collisions. They reserve fury for blocked paths or contested feeding lanes. In a crowd, they prefer straight lines and minimal turns. Inertia is a friend they trust. Run the first scenario, late light, and a wind that skates the meltwater. The elk mob pushes in tight. A large bull tries to wedge forward. His rack sweeps and other antlers clack. Several bodies jump in surprise. A rhino at the water's edge is turned away, busy pawing for grass under crusted snow. The young elk from the opening beat bumps its antlers hard into the rhino's rump, rude and unwise. Startled, the rhino pivots half a body, drops the head, and fires a reflex jab with almost no run-up. Slow it down. The horn rises on a diagonal, catching belly and the forward leg in one motion. The angle is too oblique to spear through the rib cage, but it crushes muscle and may crack 1 or 2 ribs. The foreleg kicks sideways, ligaments twist, A joint pops and swells. The elk backs out, but the gait is uneven. A migration measured in miles becomes an ordeal measured in pain. Now a snow squall. Visibility falls to a gauze. An alpha elk leads his herd across an open flat, saving wind for those behind. Ahead, a rhino digs a trench for sedges, back humped like a breathing boulder. From a distance, the elk reads only a hulking shape in the drift. An elk, he thinks. Rudely blocking the path, he draws the last charge of a lean season, drops the head, and commits to a lesson in proper lane courtesy. In slow motion, the wide rack sweeps into the rhino's shoulder just as the horn shoots up in reflex. A double injury blooms in a blink. On the elk, the rebound loads the pedicle, skull, and neck, risking microfractures, concussion, and whiplash, even if the antler does not snap. On the rhino, the shoulder girdle strains. Muscle and ligaments stretch past safe. A hairline crack may open in the scapula. If the next step finds slick ice, the rhino can slip and wrench an ankle, an error with a long bill in deep winter. Shift the strike line a few inches lower, and the elk's sweep meets the rhino's ankle square. A lateral force like that can fissure bone. A 1-ton body hanging on a broken hinge in a blizzard is the definition of slow judgment. So which weapon is more dangerous in an ice age? The elk's rack is equal parts display and domestic combat gear, safe, within rules, when both parties share the handbook. Against other species, it buys space, herds crowds, trips and topples, cuts across, but it tangles often and channels big rebound back into the carrier. The rhino's horn, paired with a low center of mass, is a single-purpose tool for short, direct violence. One well-timed thrust can break a leg or open a belly and end the story without drama. But angle matters. Hit bone-hard antler badly, and the dead arrives in the rhino's own joints. At distance, out in the open, the rhino is the silhouette nobody argues with. Few animals volunteer to stand in front of a moving straight line. In a crush at a thaw line, where antlers weave like a forest of sticks and sight lines are chopped to pieces by steam and wind, the elk can become its own worst enemy, sparking chaos that punishes the nearest body, sometimes his. Weapon design isn't just about how hard you hit. It's about what still works after you hit. Antlers can fall and return. Horns can wear and chip and carry on. But a broken leg in deep winter has no sequel. The final picture returns to the water margin and the white breath of two giants. Wind combs through bone crowns, and over a low horn made for ramming, the bodies separate. A corridor opens. Quiet returns. Next time, add a true predator to the frame, a Smilodon, or a short-faced bear, and see how the calculus shifts. On that day, antlers and horn won't only be weapons, they'll be boundary lines between the ones who keep moving and dinner. Imagine you are driving before sunrise through a cold wetland. A thin sheet of mist covers the flats like a scarf. The road is empty, then the cabin goes dark. A huge shape skims the fog above the hood, like two paddles sliding across the sky. It is not a wind turbine. It is not a helicopter. It is a pair of flat antlers, each wide as a garage door, carried by a giant deer stepping across the road. If Megaloceros, the so-called giant Irish elk, still lived beside us, how different would our world feel? They were not elk in the North American sense, not moose either. Megaloceros was a true deer, a giant that walked across Europe and Asia during the last ice age. The signature was the rat, not narrow tines, but palmated antlers that spread like two fan palms. Males grew those fans every year, wore them like a billboard, then dropped them and started again with spring. The body stood near an adult's shoulder, heavy as a motorcycle. Thick neck, deep chest, long legs made for marsh and tall grass. These were open country animals. They liked wind and room, a skyline with nothing for antlers to snag. They were not monsters. They were grazers that lived by the quiet logic of grass. Roll time back a few thousand years. Ice pulls back and new meadows open. On wet soil, young grass and wildflowers thicken. A herd of Megaloceros follows the water's edge and leaves low pencil lines across the green. In autumn, the air drums with the rut. Bulls call and answer. The flat antlers are not only beauty, they are a sign and a tool, balanced for side hits and shoves that sound like two oars clapping. Winter comes and the crowns drop. Crescents print the snow, and the cycle resets. The clock of that landscape is a clock a child could read without words. Now drop that herd into the 21st century. Maps crowd with roads, fences, power lines, golf courses, farms, and hobby drones. It feels like there is no room for an animal wearing 2 antennas 3 meters wide, but people are very good at learning. If this species returned, we would find ways to live with it because the trade is real. In return for space, we get the kind of place that breathes. We get open grass, clean edges, and a story that makes drivers pull over, switch off the engine, and listen. Morning begins when the sky is still pale. Cows of the herd lead calves down to the water. They do not mow a lawn to the ground. They drift and trim, leaving low windows of light in the grass. Midday brings wind. The herd climbs a dry rise. They stand, groom, flick flies. In late light, young bulls practice with the new antlers, bumping like sparring partners. It is an ancient routine with modern benefits. Browsing keeps shrubs from choking wetlands. Moving herds hold natural fire breaks across dry grass. Seeds ride in fur and get dropped along the lines they walk. You could call it ecosystem engineering on hooves. The first conflict is the road. A 600 to 700 kilogram bull puts its shoulder at windshield height. A sudden crossing at dusk is every driver's nightmare. The answer is not taller fences. It is smarter routes. Wild bridges as wide as basketball courts. No low beams to catch antlers. Fences with springy rails and post spacing that lets a trapped rack turn free. Electronic signs that use GPS data to show when a herd usually crosses. In the traffic app, a gold window pops up. 5:30 to 6:10. Herd moving to mineral lick, and drivers slow without drama. The second conflict is on farms. Megaloceros loves salt and trace minerals. Instead of breaking fences to raid feed sheds, they can be pulled to the edge by design. Build salt stations at field margins. Give them a tall scratching post, a tray with approved minerals, and a simple motion camera that pings the owner if the herd strays too close to the barns. Over months, the paths stabilize, collisions drop, and the data flows to a community dashboard where farmers and biologists can read the same map. The third conflict is in parks. The rut is delicate. Rather than close the woods, managers can shift to long view watching. Set an observation hill 200 meters away. Add public binoculars. Stagger entry times and keep sound rules simple. The goal is not the closest photo. The goal is to feel a whole valley ring. It turns out people like that more. They pay not just to see a big animal, but to watch a landscape work on its original rhythm. There is even a small clean economy around antlers that fall each winter. After the last cold snap, permitted volunteers walk set routes and pick up sheds only. No chasing. Back at a local shed house, each pair is weighed, tagged with place and date, and photographed. A portion becomes handcraft, knife handles, combs, buttons, folk instruments. Fine powder goes into biocomposite panels that replace plastic, the kind used in acoustic baffles, train handrails, and light furniture. Every item carries a short story. This came from the north bank of Glenmore Fen after a February gale. Anyone who touches it becomes the next audience to the meadow. Coexistence also means we learn to move slower. Nobody rides a Megaloceros. Nobody yokes one to a plow. Deer skeletons are not built that way. What changes is our pace. Schools on the herd route take a field hour on the meadow. Kids kneel and notice grass tips snipped at a repeating height, like a ruler cut them. They hammer in bright reflector posts to replace barbed wire. They measure drainage ditches and discover why the channel should be wider than an antler span. In edge neighborhoods, streetlights shift to wildlife-friendly spectra. At truck washes, a new gate traps feed odors, so they do not call the herd to the lot. Small changes stack. More important, They teach each town that they share authorship of the view. Follow one day in the life of a warden. Call him Liam. At 5, he checks a scratching post and finds a dented antler caught on the top board. He gloves up, lifts it, lays it in a crate, and notes North Meadow, old rust stain, shedding begins. At 9, he dials a farmer across the fen. The herd will likely hit the east salt at 5. Move the hay wagon off the lane. At 4, he stands on the deck of the watch hill and whispers to a visiting family. If you hear a low drum, stay quiet. That is your lucky minute. At 6, the sun slides copper across the antlers. A row of kids holds its breath. One boy asks, "How is it that big?" Liam says, in words even smaller than the boy, "Because this place is big enough that it does not have to be small." Science is at your shoes, not just in a lab. Ecologists hide pressure sensors under a boardwalk plank to count steps. They sample droppings to see which seeds move with the herd. They fit drop-off GPS collars and build a map of antler roads over years. That map does not live in a drawer. It hangs on the wall of the community hall next to wedding photos and a Little League schedule and a cafe menu. When a county plans to widen a road, the engineer looks at the red line, looks at the herd line, and asks if the project can slide 200 meters. More often than you think, the answer is yes. Etiquette is the real survival guide. Keep a respectful distance. Clip your dog on a leash. If the herd begins to cross, stop, cut the engine, let them pass. Remember that a shed antler is part of a public story, not a private trophy. Do not step into the center of a group for a close photo. Do not hover a drone over their heads. Pick up the loose fishing line you find at a culvert. Thin nylon loops are the #1 trap for any rat. Why try this hard? Because the return is not abstract. Open grass soaks rain better and lowers flash mud floods. Clearer marsh edges smell cleaner and make fewer mosquitoes. Biodiversity rebounds. Birds, insects, and flowers come back as if someone turned on a switch. Local economies get a new season. During the rut, families travel for a kind of natural concert. No cement stage needed. And when you find a sun-bleached shard of antler by a lane, you can tell the kid at your side that it is proof of a fair deal between people and the place they live. Now go back to that car on the morning road. The giant shadow slides once more over the hood. You know what to do. Ease off the gas. Lift your eyes. The great deer steps across in silence. Grass folds under a broad hoof like a polite handshake. When it clears the verge, the car stays still for a few extra seconds. Not from fear, from awe. You just watched a fragment of the past step into the present outside a museum, outside a screen, right in front of you. Megaloceros living with humans is more than a biological thought experiment. It is a test of character. Will we make room again for things that are large and beautiful and not owned by anyone? If the answer is yes, the story already ends well before it begins, because wind and grass and mud and those wide flat antlers know how to tell their part without us.